Hello, good afternoon. For a lot of you, it's good morning. For some of you, it is even good evening. It's Joshua Feinberg coming to you from the data center universe over at DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you're tuning into this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about all over the data center ecosystem, including operators like colocation, wholesale, hyperscale, edge, and modular companies, technology and facilities related companies that sell to and partner with data centers, as well as construction and real estate companies that work with data center operators and end user data centers. And of course, we don't want to forget about the outsourced sales and marketing companies that are also a really important part of the data center ecosystem. And what we're talking about, these sales and marketing challenges, are relevant to the entire go-to-market team across marketing, sales, account management, sometimes known as customer success, product, channel partnerships, and the executive sponsor, the leadership that brings together and aligns and orchestrates everything to happen in one fluid motion to propel your company's growth forward. If this is the first time you're tuning in, make sure that you are subscribed to our data center sales and marketing email newsletter so you can get notified on Sundays about upcoming educational events and resources just like this. You can subscribe directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com. So what is on the agenda for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream? So we're going to tackle 6 really, really big questions that we have heard about from your peers all over data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. The questions, the topics that we'll be tackling this week include how to market and sell modular data center solutions, how a co-location, hybrid, cloud, and managed IT services company can generate leads, as well as how a carrier-neutral data center operator can change customers' mindset to accept co-location. After that, we'll take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Then when we come back in the second half, we'll look at how a data center and cloud services provider, a CSP, can create market awareness and improve branding awareness and branding overall, how to discover new markets for sustainable data centers using advanced cooling and renewable energy. And as we head down the home stretch on this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we'll look at how a global IT sourcing advisory firm can address marketing and sales challenges with intermediaries. So let's jump right in. By the way, if you have a topic or idea for an upcoming question that we should address in an upcoming show, make sure that you drop that into the comments wherever you're watching. Also, let us know where you're joining us from and what you do in the data center industry. So first question is how to market and sell modular data center solutions. How to market and sell modular data centers. That is a terrific question, and it's one that has continued to evolve over the years. I'll tell you why in a moment. So I first came across modular data centers about 10 years ago. Dell was relatively early on. I remember touring a massive facility in Phoenix that at the time was IO Data Centers. That's now part of Iron Mountain. I remember going out and visiting the base layer. Like all of these companies, DC Blocks, they're all doing great things in the space. The challenge is a combination of differentiation and supply chain to be able to deliver on demand. And I think for a lot of companies early on, one of the biggest challenges is figuring out exactly where they're going to thrive the best. And the first biggest cut is figuring out geographically, can they truly market and sell and ship and service these modular data centers globally, or are they focusing primarily in one region of the world or one country or a couple of countries. The next decision they have to make is, are they going to focus on selling like edge applications to enterprises? Are they going to focus more on operators, like selling them to hyperscale or wholesale providers to be placed in facilities, or standalone? So there's essentially two different kinds of businesses there. And more than likely, your company has someone who's in charge of the product roadmap, or perhaps a whole team that's in charge of your product roadmap. So getting this right is a function of scaling the business profitably. From an outside perspective, if I'm looking at your website, I'm more than likely going to hit your case studies page and read about the kind of companies where you've had the greatest success with your modular data centers. Do they tend to be like end user applications? Do they tend to be operator applications? Do they tend to be like edge applications where there's latency sensitive stuff going on? Are they temporary applications that are used for like a major event or something like that, or disaster recovery, a DR kind of application? More than likely, by spending time on your case studies page, I'll start to get a feel for that. From an internal perspective, you also have the resources to dive into your CRM, your customer relationship management system, and read all the notes about who has been most successful with your modular data centers. From that information, you should be able to back into documenting your ideal client profile, your ICP. So you know geographically where your best clients tend to be located, who get the most value. You know, size-wise, not so much a matter of power or density or square feet or square meters, but in terms of how big or how small that particular company is that you've had the best success with for your modular data centers. If you're going to use a prospecting tool for marketing and sales like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or on the paid ad side like LinkedIn Campaign Manager, or any one of the prospecting tools, that most of them are going to normalize based on headcount, number of employees. Some of them will allow you to normalize based on annual revenue, also known as turnover. But at some point, you're going to want to draw a line in the sand with where you've been most successful and determine the band of the range of company sizes where you believe going forward your clients are going to be happiest and where you're going to be happiest. More than likely, there will be a minimum client size that company needs to have to be able to afford your minimums, to be able to afford your modular data centers. So if you're really being self-aware and digging into where you've been most successful, can a startup, a pre-revenue startup with like 5 or 10 employees, even a couple dozen employees, can they really afford your minimums? Or do they already need to have, for example, 50 employees or 5 or 10 million in revenue or your local currency equivalent to meet your minimums? At the other end of the range, at what point is an enterprise so large that their sales cycle may be too burdensome for your company to be able to absorb, or their compliance or certification requirements or financial requirements or legal requirements may be too much for you to absorb? So for a modular data center company, maybe you're setting the floor at like 50 employees, and maybe you're setting the ceiling at 5,000 or 10,000 employees or something like that, where they just would need a much more sophisticated modular data center provider than you're currently able to deliver with your current capabilities. Maybe they're global and they want to be able to buy from one company globally as opposed to having to buy in each region. All of these are considerations for you having that self-awareness to figure out in your ideal client profile, not only geographically where those clients are going to be located, but their company size in terms of headcount. The third area that can be especially relevant is industries, vertical markets, niches, whatever, however you pronounce it. Because when it comes to certain geographic regions and comes to certain business models, healthcare, financial services, education, government, for sure, there are certification and compliance requirements that come up that your company may be in great shape to address or may not be in great shape to address. But either way, that's a really important self-awareness to get out of that if you're defining when you're defining your ideal client profile. And then within those companies, historically, what are the kinds of stakeholders that you've interacted with both pre and post sales? Has it been a facilities director? Has it been an IT executive? Has it been like a real estate person, like a development person? Again, only you can answer that. We'll see some clues in your case studies. You'll see a lot more clues in your CRM. But what that's going to help you to do is figure out who are the buyer personas that you need to market and sell to, and what do they care most about at the intersection of what they're trying to achieve in their professional goals, their team's goals, their company's goals, and their biggest stressors and their frustrations at the intersection of your business model, at the intersection of being a modular data center provider. And typically the most important kind of stakeholder that has the biggest sway, the biggest pull in the decision about how they research and compare options, evaluate pricing, and ultimately who they decide to buy from for their modular data center needs, you'll call that most important stakeholder your primary buyer persona. We know that there rarely is a single decision maker anymore. Everyone always asks me, how do I get to the magic decision maker? I'm like, is there really a magic decision maker? It's usually a decision committee, because even if you get a meeting or a warm introduction to the person that's ultimately going to sign off, everyone is so risk averse now that they're almost certainly going to send you back to go meet with their team to build consensus. And then you loop that person back in if you manage to have that person have that initial introduction, have some face time with that person early on. So yeah, the whole idea of what does it mean to be an account executive and enterprise sales in this kind of environment? You're being like a project manager who is especially good at supporting your internal champion and developing alignment across silos within the company. So you have your primary decision maker and the aggregate, the consensus on their biggest goals and challenges when it comes to modular data centers. You have a secondary decision maker. Maybe your primary as a technology person, maybe your secondary as a facilities person, maybe it's a financial person, maybe it's a compliance person. It's going to vary depending on the nature of your business model and your target market, but it is really, really important to not only figure out what kind of people you need to educate and build trust with as part of your marketing and sales, but ranking them, prioritizing them so you know where to concentrate your resources around building educational content, hosting amazingly impactful educational events. And then from your ideal client profile, you'll be able to build out a target account list to support your ABM, your account-based marketing. And from your buyer personas, you'll be able to build out a content strategy and an event strategy that allows you to show up in a way that your buyers want you to show up in today's hyper-competitive marketplace. So instead of showing up as a vendor, like it's still 10 years ago, you're showing up more as an expert, as a teacher, as a consultant, as a trusted advisor, and perhaps even a thought leader. Because in today's self-driven buyer's journey, where so much of the researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you in the room, the only way you're going to get back into the room to have an active role in the early and the middle stages of their buyer's journey and the early and the middle stages of the sales cycle is to completely revamp your positioning. So instead of being seen like an AE, an account executive, or a sales development rep, or a business development rep, or a vendor, we get the heck out of the vendor box as quickly as possible. And we instead show up as the experts about anything and everything having to do with your business category, modular data centers. And the better job you can do with that, the more likely it is that you spend a lot of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision with your future clients, with your prospects. Because if you don't spend that time with them, make no mistake, someone else is. And that someone else is going to have a dramatic impact on how they frame the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the different options that are in front of them in the awareness and the consideration stages of the buyer's journey, in the first 83% of their research and decision-making process. When you do this well at an elite level, you will not only spend several of these touch points with the most important people at these accounts, but you will nearly guarantee that you stay on the short list. In some cases, when you do this exceptionally well, by the time they're finally ready for a sales conversation, by the time they've finally hit that 83% point, you may discover that most or all of their competitive alternatives, your competition, have disappeared from the shortlist. That's an awesome thing when it happens. But it all starts by drawing a line in the sand and recognizing going forward that in a self-driven buyer's journey, your buyers have all the power. It used to be you were in on these conversations about half of the time, 56% of the time in the mid-2010s. Now, you're not in the conversation much at all. You still had, even though 56% of the buyer's journey was happening before sales contact, you still had 44% where you were in there. Today, 83% is happening before sales contacts. You only have 17% of the journey left in there. You don't really get to spend much time with your prospects and clients anymore if they see you as sales professionals. If they see you as experts, if they see you as consultants, that's a completely different ballgame. So when it comes to marketing and selling modular data centers, get really specific about who they are, what their biggest goals are, what their biggest challenges are, and figure out a way for you and your client-facing team to show up in a way that exudes expertise, that makes it so your prospects and clients actually want to spend time with members of your client-facing team, as opposed to you having to chase them and beg for attention all the time. That's what I would be thinking about when it comes to your playbook going forward for marketing and selling modular data center solutions. Next question up is, how does a colocation, hybrid cloud, and managed IT services company generate leads? How does a company that's in the business of colocation, hybrid cloud, and managed IT services generate leads? That's a terrific question. And the reason it's an especially important question is in some of these categories, some of these business models are really starting to face a lot of pressure on their pricing, are facing a lot of pressure around commoditization. So the first thing that we need to figure out is, are these three separate lines of business, colo, hybrid cloud, and managed services, all sold to the same client base, or are they sold to distinctly different client base? That's really, really important, because that's going to help us figure out whether our playbook for lead generation, can be well served by having a single ideal client profile and a single set of buyer personas and a single content and event strategy and a single sales playbook, marketing and sales playbook, or do we need potentially a different playbook for each of those three lines of business? If all three of those services are being sold to the same client base, and there's a ton of natural cross-selling and upselling going on both pre and post-sales, and I know a lot of operators look to land and expand. They get whatever they can to get a foot in the door, and then they have their account managers, their customer success managers, helping onboard that client and explain about all the different ways that they could potentially help them. Either way can work fine. It really just depends on how you staff up your team. But the first thing we really need to figure out is, are you selling colocation, hybrid cloud, and managed IT services to the same clients across the board, or are they three different kinds of clients? To keep things simple, let's say it's one singular client base. So within that one singular client base, we should be able to look at your logos. We should be able to look at your case studies. We should be able to look in your CRM and figure out what your happiest clients, your most successful clients, all have in common. Where are they located? That's a really interesting one just in and of itself when it comes to colo, hybrid cloud, and managed services. Why? Because there's two kinds of playbooks that can work for lead generation when it comes to colo, hybrid cloud, and managed services. One is a hyper-local playbook, and the other one is a global playbook. Let's take each of these in turn when it comes to your lead generation. The hyper-local playbook means that you're typically looking to play up the fact that your facility or facilities are located in extremely close proximity to where your clients are located. So much to the point where your clients can get in the car and within 30 or 60 minutes, they are at your facility. When you have that kind of proximity and you're looking for a hyper-local sales and marketing playbook to power lead generation for colo, hybrid cloud, and managed IT services, the single biggest thing that you can do is to educate and build trust with your prospects and clients in person. What a lot of people in this space are sleeping on is they're investing very, very aggressively in attending and sponsoring other people's events at the expense of spending more time on their own events. If you think about historically, there's always been this split between paid media, owned media and earned media. And if we look at the first cousin of that, there's paid events, there's earned events, and there are owned events. Owned events is what we're primarily concentrating on. What this means is if your facility, if your building, if your buildings have a foyer, if they have a nice conference room, if they have a classroom, that is the golden location where a lot of the education and trust building needs to be happening, not once in a while, but on a very, very regular basis. So if we've dialed in our ideal client profile, so we know exactly where the future clients, where these prospects are located, the next thing is we want to get really specific about what I call Goldilocks, dialing in not too hot, not too cold, not too big, not too small. What's the minimum number of employees that one of these prospects or clients needs to have to afford your minimums? And at what point are they so large that they're really out of your reach for a good fit client? Is it at 1,000 employees, 5,000, 10,000 employees? There likely is a ceiling unless you yourself are a massive enterprise. So once we've dialed in, okay, they're going to be hyper local, so we want them within a 30-minute, 60-minute drive of where we're located, adjust for traffic, miles, kilometers, whatever is relevant for your case. Then we want a band for a minimum number of employees, a range for a minimum number of employees and a maximum number of employees. And then we want to get a little more specific too about the nature of their business, their industries, their niche, their vertical market, because we know when it comes to things like hybrid cloud and colo and managed IT services in specific geographic regions, there's for sure certifications and credentialing and compliance issues that come up where your company could be in great shape for those, or your company could be completely disqualified depending on the nature of their business. Like, for example, in healthcare or financial services or education or government or something like that. Once we've defined that ideal client profile, then you can go ahead and build out a target account list, what many might call account-based marketing or account-based selling. This is a finite list of anywhere from a few dozen, usually a few hundred, in some cases a few thousand companies that fit the definition of your ideal client profile. And then we need to figure out within those companies who are the most important kinds of people that you want to be educating and building trust with. And a lot of the job titles, a lot of how you decide the buyer personas will depend on how big or how small their companies are. If you tend to skew on the smaller side, then you tend to find companies where people wear a lot of different hats, have a lot of different roles in a single job. If you tend to sell more large mid-market, then it wouldn't be unheard of to be selling into an IT department that has even a couple dozen employees, but at least a few handful of employees. And that's a very different context than a business with 50 or 100 employees where there may be one or two people in the IT department. But we want to get super specific about the nature of who that person is, what their biggest goals are, what their biggest challenges are, and prioritize who's the most important kind of person and the second most important kind of person that we need to build relationships with to grow our colo, hybrid cloud, and managed IT services business. From there, do your research, do your homework, figure out the consensus in their own words on their biggest goals and challenges, and use that to build out a calendar of the topics that you want to cover that are of high interest to your most important kind of buyer personas. That calendar, if you can pick the top 12 topics that are on there, should be your events calendar for your hyper local events for the next 12 months, once a month. Within that topic, then you need to essentially figure out what you want to cover for each of those and figure out if you have an internal subject matter expert who feels comfortable talking for 20 or 30 minutes on that topic, or if you want to bring in some clients or some channel partners or some vendor subject matter experts, whatever it is. But identify those 12 topics that you know are of high interest to your first and second most important buyer personas. And then identify if you have expertise internally or you need to look to clients or channel partners or vendors or something like that to fill that gap. Essentially, we're getting into the events business. And the cool part with getting into the events business is when you're hosting this in your own facility, you'd be shocked at how inexpensive these events are relative to traveling to national and global conferences. I talk to people who do like these lunch and learns and breakfast events, and $500 or $1,000 or your local currency equivalent for the entire event. And the only thing that tends to drive the cost up more is if you don't have a good list of potential clients already sitting in your CRM. But if you're doing account-based marketing, if you did your ideal client profile right, your sales team, your marketing team should already have this database. So all you're really doing is making sure that you give enough lead time and sending out emails and posting it on your social media and assuming that you already have good reach with your intended ideal clients that you want to be able to attend events. That's just labor. It's just sweat equity. The actual out-of-pocket costs, obviously, it's in your conference room, it's in your foyer, it's in your classroom. That, I guess you could play accounting games with trying to allocate or figure out the imputed cost of using that space, but you already have the real estate covered at your building, so the cost on that is free, essentially, right? So all you're really talking about doing is like, okay, the room holds 18. In a perfect world, we'd love to have the room packed to capacity. We know there's going to be an attendance rate issue because it's probably going to be a free event, and we're just trying to estimate the food costs. How much does it cost to bring in pizza or bagels or whatever for feeding people? So the playbook with this, really simple, is it's you introduce them, you teach them some cool stuff that's highly relevant to their job, kind of similar to what you might do in a webinar. You talk for 20 or 30 minutes. If there's a second speaker, they talk for 20 or 30 minutes. You open it up for Q&A for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You give them time to mingle and network with each other for a few minutes when they first arrive. And after that, either in between the two sessions or after the session. And of course, I'm sure you want to take people around for tours in your facility too, right? Obviously, they're not going to bring their coffee with them. That's a whole separate problem. This is the advantage of having a foyer and a conference room and a classroom, so you can approach this the right way. But yeah, when it comes to, that's the hyper-local playbook for co-location, hybrid cloud, and managed services. And I always tell people, when you're doing those events, bring along a videographer with you, because for every 15, 20 people in the room, there's probably another 10 times more, 50 times more than that who should have been in the room but weren't there. So that becomes a great resource for your attendees to share this with others that are on the team. And you'll know you're doing this right going forward, where at event 2 or 3 or 4, they start to bring their coworkers with them, they bring their boss with them, and you start to win over the committee as part of these educational events where you're educating and building trust. So that's the hyper-local version. You can also pretty much do the same thing with the global version. A lot of people pick co-location, hybrid cloud, and managed services facilities because you have a location where there's a gap in their coverage and they need, for either compliance reasons, governance reasons, or latency reasons, they need to have their servers in a facility where you happen to be located. So instead of focusing on getting people to visit your facility several times a year for you to educate and build trust with them so they see you as the go-to experts, you're pretty much doing this virtually, long distance. So it's webinars. It's the same content. Figure out your ideal client profile, figure out your buyer personas, figure out the 12 topics that they care most about. In many cases, it may line up nearly perfectly, and the same slides that you use for doing your educational event in your classroom or conference room, you can use on your webinars or in your live streams or whatever you're going to do, except you're inviting people that are specifically interested in having a presence in your particular facility, and they're attending long distance online. This could be in another part of the country where you're located in. It could be another part of your continent. It could be on another part of the planet. Up to you to figure out your product market fit and your go-to-market fit and your ideal client profile and your addressable market. But at the end of the day, you have like this hyper-local playbook. You have this long distance virtual playbook. Obviously, for the virtual playbook, when they get to the decision stage, if they're not going to come and tour your facility in person, you can do virtual tours, you can do video-based tours. There's a lot of things that you can do with that. But at the end of the day, our goal is to understand and respect the self-driven buyer's journey that most of our best prospects and clients are now navigating through. And the way we show up early and often, and as many of those 28 touch points as possible between complete stranger and purchase decision, is we need to show up as teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, perhaps even thought leaders on anything and everything having to do with co-location, hybrid cloud, and managed IT services. That's the key to generating more highly qualified leads. Next question up is, by the way, if you're getting good value from today's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you have an idea for an upcoming question that we should address in an upcoming show, make sure to leave that in the comments. Next question up is, how does a carrier neutral data center operator change customers' mindset to accept colocation? How does a carrier neutral data center operator change its customers' mindset to be accepting of colocation? So this particular person didn't tell us what the status quo is, but in most cases, it's usually having a premise-based data center. They're running their own data center. In some cases, your colocation is competing against public cloud from a hyperscaler like Azure or AWS or Google Cloud or something like that. But typically, when I get that kind of question, how a carrier neutral data center operator can change the customer's mind to accept colocation, it's usually because that customer still has equipment sitting in a server closet in their own facilities. In other words, they're running their own data center, which may or may not have air quotes around data centers, around the data center facility, depending on the level of sophistication in their facility. So the best way to change that customer's mindset is to get super specific about who that customer is. Where are they located? How big or how small are they? What industries do they tend to be from? That'll give you your ideal client profile. Then do your buyer persona research. Figure out in this target market who's the most important and second most important kind of stakeholder that you're trying to win over to get them to be more accepting of colocation. Once you've determined your primary and secondary buyer persona and rank them and prioritize them, then you'll need to do a little bit of customer insight research. You can get some of this by talking to internal stakeholders, but most of this should come from talking with representative clients and prospects. Ideally, face-to-face. Video meetings would be the second best choice. If you don't have access to either of those, a functional way to get started with this is to identify 10 or 20 people that meet that criteria, pull up their LinkedIn profiles, do a Google search on each of those people, and see how they describe themselves, see what their words are when they talk about these topics. Find the biggest consensus on what they do in their job, what their job titles tend to be, what they're trying to achieve professionally and their goals, what they're struggling with most professionally, where they hang out online and offline. That will help you document your buyer persona, and that's going to be really, really important to getting the messaging right, getting the priorities right, not only for your website copywriting and your outbound emails, but all of your content, all of your events efforts. So you're not guessing, you're getting consensus on what is top of mind for your prioritized groups. When it comes to the education and trust building, that's going to be super critical to get them to become more accepting of colocation. So from there, you should be in a good position to come up with a content calendar and events calendar that's going to allow you to reach those kinds of clients, both the ones that are at the point where they're ready for sales contact, but the much wider part of opportunity for the people that haven't reached that 83% point where they could be a really good fit a couple of weeks or a couple of months down the road. But in order for you to spend time with them during the awareness and the consideration stages, you're going to need to show up more as a consultant, as a teacher, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor. And the way you do that is by creating amazingly helpful educational resources. Blogs, articles, email newsletters, social posts, downloadable ebooks, white papers, planning guides, super relevant email newsletters, as well as hosting amazingly helpful educational events, both online and offline. Online events would be like webinars and live streams, kind of like what you're watching right now, as well as if you have the luxury of being able to host prospects and clients in your own facility, the offline version of those, like breakfast seminars, lunch and learns, events that are actually in your facility where you're doing the education and trust building face-to-face as opposed to virtually. But in terms of changing their mind to accept co-location, sure, you need to understand what's top of mind for them. Typically, as they get to the middle of their buyer's journey, the middle of the sales cycle, that's where I would introduce some social proof. That's where I would bring out your clients that were also originally a little bit hesitant to move out of their current facilities into co-location, but they're really glad they did. And because of that, having taken that step with your company a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, a couple of years ago, they've gotten all of these tangible benefits. That's who you parade out around in the middle of their buyer's journey. If you're hosting events in person, for example, if you're hosting a lunch and learn and there's 20 people in the room, if you can get 2 or 3 of those 20 people to be clients that love you, that can sing your praises in person, it's even more impactful, even more powerful for them to hear from people that used to suffer with the consequences of the status quo with having equipment on premise in their own facilities. And because of that, they didn't get much time off from work. Their vacations were totally ruined. They were always stressed out. There was always unplanned downtime. They never felt at peace. And because of that, they never were super confident in their technology roadmap. Now that they met your company and they have moved their equipment into co-location, they've enjoyed all of these benefits, and they explain the benefits with the peace of mind and being able to have real vacations and the company scaling and much higher uptime, compliance, much higher level of cyber and physical security, whatever the benefits are that they can make tangible that would typically go in a case study, except they're presenting the case study live. So that's the playbook that I would use when it comes to how a carrier neutral data center operator can change their customers' minds to accept co-location, get really dialed into who these prospects and clients are, what they care most about, their biggest goals and challenges. Use that to build out your entire content calendar, your events calendar. By getting really specific on your ideal client profile, you should be able to build out a good target account list. But at the end of the day, the transformation content that's going to, once you've caught their attention and put a bug in their head that maybe they're not so satisfied with the status quo, that what's going to tend to change their mind the most is hearing from your clients that used to be just like these reluctant enterprise people that had equipment in their own facilities and resisted for a long time at the expense of all of these problems. And once they made these change, all these problems disappeared. So that's how you paint the change from the status quo of how a carrier neutral data center operator can change customers' mindsets to accept co-location. We'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor, and we'll come back with 3 more of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center ecosystem.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey there, Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you're watching our weekly Q&A show, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A. So next question up is, how can a data center and cloud services provider, a CSP, create market awareness, improve awareness, and improve branding? How does a data center and cloud service provider create market awareness, improve awareness, and improve branding? That's a terrific question, because in this particular category of data center provider and cloud services provider, a lot of companies are marginalizing their future and allowing themselves to be shoved into the vendor box and facing a lot of commoditization and differentiation problems because they're not staying ahead of this particular issue in light of all the changes in buyer preferences that have happened in the last 3, 4, 5 years. So let's take a trip down memory lane back to 10 years ago when it came to how your prospects and clients researched and made their purchase decisions, evaluated pricing when it came to data center services and cloud services. It used to be that your best buyers would typically spend about half of their buyer's journey, half of their sales cycle with your sales team. At the time, CEB, the corporate executive board that's now part of Gartner, did research with Salesforce and SiriusDecisions, and they found that about 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before sales contact. That wasn't too bad, right? So if it was 56% over, at least your sales team got to spend about 44% of the sales cycle with your best prospects and clients. Those days are way in the rearview mirror now. They're long, long gone. 10 years of digital transformation, a lot of baby boomers retiring, more Gen Z, more millennials in decision-making roles, millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s during the pandemic. And we're now in this place where that 56% has jumped to 83%, meaning that Gartner's latest research has found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before sales contact or vendor contact. That means even in the best scenario, you're only getting to spend about 17% of the buyer's journey with your best prospects and clients for data center services and cloud services. And that is a massive problem, because if you're only getting in there in the last 17%, make no mistake, during that first 83%, they've been learning and they've been figuring out the criteria that they're going to use for how they purchase data center services and cloud services. But if you're not showing up in that first 83%, they're learning from someone else. And that someone else, in many cases, may be a direct competitor to you. It may be an indirect competitor, or it may be a non-business model competitor. A direct competitor are the obvious competitors that torture your sales team at the bottom of the funnel, at the end of the sales cycle, and you always seem to be losing deals to them, and their name keeps coming up over and over and over again. An indirect competitor is a less obvious competitor. They're less obvious because they don't tend to have a big presence in your geographic region, or their company is much smaller or much larger than yours. But they're just relevant enough that a lot of prospects and clients are paying attention to them, not only for potentially buying data center and cloud services from them, but they're paying a lot of attention to them in the awareness and the consideration stages of the buyer's journey, when all the criteria is being formed, when all the people on the decision committee are getting together and figuring out what they're going to prioritize. So if you're able to get found early and often in as many of those 28 touch points as possible between complete stranger and purchase decision, you're setting yourself up for a lot of success. You're really stacking the decks in your favor. You're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list. And in many cases, the longer you stay with those prospects throughout their buyer's journey, the more you're going to start knocking competitors off of the short list, because they won't be able to hold a candle to you. And you're getting so much, your prospects and clients are getting so much value from hanging out with your client-facing team, learning about the issues that are top of mind that align with their biggest goals and challenges. There's no reason for them to look elsewhere. However, the flip side of it is, if you're not getting found until the decision stage, you may think that, yay, they're ready to buy. The problem is all of the tough decisions have already been made, and the decks have now been stacked against you, and you're immediately treading water. This puts you into commodity broker status. It causes immense pressure on your profit margins. It limits who you can hire. It limits what you can do in terms of your client investment. It's demoralizing. It's a downward spiral on everything. And when this happens, it's more than likely happening because of a lack of awareness of how much buyer preferences have changed, and as a direct result, not making the right kind of investments in positioning and rebranding your company to be seen more as the go-to experts about anything and everything having to do with data center and cloud services at the intersection of your ideal client profile, where they're located, their company size, their verticals, their industries. When that kind of decision is made, it typically needs to be made all the way at the executive level. If you're from a huge enterprise company with tens of thousands of employees, yeah, your executive sponsor doesn't necessarily need to be your CEO. It's probably a chief commercial officer, revenue officer, marketing officer, something like that. But if you're from a company that has a few hundred or a couple dozen employees or less, for sure, in the data center space, that's hyper-competitive space with global competition, you're going to need your CEO to weigh in on this. You're going to need your CEO to lead by example, because this is going to be a culture change for many marketing and sales organizations that's quite different than how they've been operating using the status quo playbook that probably hasn't changed much over the last 10 years. And this big culture change is going to be drawing a line in the sand where they say, we are fed up with losing deals to those schmucks over there. They don't know what the heck they're doing, but somehow they're managing to get in to these deals that we're not even aware of. What's happening? Why are they doing this? So it's a matter of saying, we're better than that, and we're not going to tolerate it anymore. And this is our chance to take 2, 3, 4 steps forward in the marketplace. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to make it known that we are the definitive experts in this space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center services. And there are no direct competitors. There's no indirect competitors. There's not going to be non-business model competitors that are going to outwork us when it comes to getting there. And it's also this culture change not only is drawing the line in the sand with being seen as the definitive go-to teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. It's also recognizing that your brand is no longer just about the brand guide. It's no longer just about the logo. It's no longer just about the hexadecimal colors. It's no longer about the fonts. Your brand is now everything that the marketplace says about your company and your team when you are not in the room. And given that you're hardly in the room for any of that time anymore, best case scenario, you only are getting in the room for 17% of that buyer's journey. Your content, your educational events take over for what used to happen face to face. So if you want to get back in the room and you want to improve your brand awareness and you want to improve your visibility in the marketplace, it is incredibly important. It is mission critical that you show up early and often so that you're found by the right people in the right places at the right time. And most of all, in the right context to get the heck out of the vendor box, get out of the commodity broker business and be seen as the definitive experts about anything and everything having to do with data center and cloud services for your ideal client profile in a particular geographic region, for companies at a certain size, in specific industries, in specific business models. And the better job you can do with that, the more rapidly you can create market awareness and improve branding. The more you go kicking and screaming about resisting this and trying to pretend like you have the Back to the Future DeLorean and your clients have never discovered the smartphone and they've never heard of Google and they've never heard of ChatGPT or Copilot and they don't know what the heck Alexa or Siri is, and they would never in a million years be able to find LinkedIn or attend a webinar or watch a YouTube video. If you truly believe that your clients that are internal champions of digital infrastructure actually align with those buyer behaviors, go do your homework. Go figure out your buyer personas. Because I can tell you without a doubt, in the time and place that we are operating in, even the baby boomers that are still actively involved in the buyer's journey don't meet that criteria anymore. The baby boomers, I'm Gen X, the baby boomers that are 10, 15, 20 years older than me that are still actively working in the data center ecosystem all use LinkedIn. They all watch YouTube videos. They all listen to podcasts. They all attend webinars. So I don't know who this fictional person is that is being used as the rationale for living in the past, but it's messing up your playbook big time because it's totally tone deaf for the realities and the changes of how your buyer preferences have changed. So if your company, being in the data center business, being in the cloud services business, is serious about creating market awareness, improving brand awareness, improving branding, educating and building trust is not the future. It is the present reality. These aren't changes that are going to happen. These are changes that have already happened. The only issue is you've already likely been reactionary. It's how badly you're being reactionary, how opposite of proactive you're currently being, and how long you're going to let that continue to happen, because each month that you allow that to continue to happen, you are losing share and you're not competing in a way that's relevant to how your prospects and clients research and make their purchase decisions about anything and everything having to do with data center services and cloud services. So those are all of the issues that I would be thinking about, the highly complex issues that have to do with transformation. They've transformed already. The question is whether you and your company and your go-to-market team have transformed or whether you're living in the past. That's what I would be thinking about when it comes to how a data center and cloud service provider can create market awareness, and improve branding. Next question up is, how do we discover new markets for sustainable data centers with advanced cooling and renewable energies? How do we discover new markets for sustainable data centers using advanced cooling and renewable energy? Entering new markets. Yeah, entering new markets is one of the biggest challenges that we continue to hear about throughout data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities, not just in the US, but globally, throughout the Americas, throughout EMEA, throughout Asia Pacific, Latin America. Entering new markets is a really, really big deal. We now live in a very globally connected world. The great part is this introduces you to global opportunities. The challenging part is it also introduces you to global competitors, because it used to be a fairly safe assumption 10 years ago that you could blanket the conferences and blanket the media outlets that were relevant to your most important buyer personas. That's just not enough anymore. The reason it's not enough anymore is because there's dozens of different touch points that are relevant to how your buyers research and make the purchase decisions. Most of the industry analysts point to 26 to 28 touch points now between complete stranger and purchase decision. And typically the companies that are heavily invested in field marketing and events marketing and conference marketing are making enormous bets on 1 or 2 or 3 touch points. And the problem is, when your prospects and clients go back to work the Monday morning after the conference, your impression that you made at the conference will linger for a little bit, but it has a half-life. It has a shelf life. And I can assure you that in the hyper-competitive world that we live in right now, it's not enough for those fumes to linger for 364 days till the next time you see them at next year's incarnation of that event. And in most cases, unless your prospects or clients that you met at these events were at the extreme end of their buyer's journey, they're not going to be especially receptive to your sales team, to your account executives, continuing to bug them to book a meeting. But at some point, they will prioritize that initiative. And the question is how you stay top of mind so that when they're ready, they know to come to you. The battleground with all of this now is the self-driven buyer's journey. It's leading into the fact that buyer preferences have changed dramatically, and your buyers are now calling all the shots. They are in the driver's seat. And in order for us to get back into the game with this, it's no longer enough to sit back and wait as a vendor who had this huge logo presence at this huge conference for people to find a path back to us. We need to be where they are, the right people in the right places at the right time and in the right context, so that they see your client-facing team as consultants and experts and teachers and trusted advisors, rather than just a vendor sales rep who's trying to get them onto the deals board and close them as rapidly as possible. We no longer need account executives and sales development reps that can show up and read your website to them. They don't need people that can read your slides to them. There's so many other self-driven ways that they're going to get that information. What they do need is people that can show up and diagnose and prescribe and explore before they advise, and have worked with enough similar kinds of clients to this particular prospect that they see the pattern recognition, they see the muscle memory, and they know typically what needs to happen at step 2 and 3 and 4 throughout the full journey about the next logical step. Your account executives also, when they operate more as consultants, need to be exceptionally skilled at being project managers that help their internal champions get internal alignment across their team and other teams and other silos within their company. That's one of the biggest roles that they can take. So if you think about repositioning, repackaging, showing up in a different way, instead of being seen as an account executive or sales development rep, I'm not telling you that you need to immediately go into the job titles on LinkedIn and the email signature and the business card and rethink those job titles to something more profoundly valuable, like consultant or advisor or expert, something like solutions or something like that. But what I am telling you is the vibe that your prospects and clients need to be feeling needs to feel a lot more like a Big Four consultant and a lot less like a traditional technology sales vendor person. In other words, it should feel like they're talking to someone that works for like Deloitte or PwC or EY or KPMG or Kyndryl or IBM Consulting or something like that. It should not feel like they're in a sales process and that they're a number on your deals board. And in order to do that, it requires hiring a certain kind of person. It requires professional development. It requires upskilling. It requires realignment of resources. Even the junior members of your team that are relatively new to your company, relatively new to your industry, can play a role in this. It's just they're going to be more like tour guides or a concierge that helps to point prospects and clients in the direction of other expert resources in your company. They could, for example, be a fantastic moderator at a webinar or conference series or something like that once they're a couple months in. But for sure, it's incredibly important when you're publishing educational content and educational events everyone that's client facing needs to be consuming those resources at the same pace that your prospects and clients are consuming them, because the most ridiculous but often happening credibility killer that can happen in your sales process is for your prospects and clients to know your content and know your webinars better than your own team does. Want to talk about a credibility fail? Watch that happen and watch how they instantly lose the opportunity, the invitation to be in the room with that prospects and clients. So if you're publishing great blogs and great downloadable content and great podcasts and great webinars, for sure, instilling a culture where that's mandated to consume all of that in order for your AEs, for your SDRs to have a good excuse to have these great impactful conversations with prospects that are consuming this content. They need to be able to add value above and beyond what that prospect and client. You can't afford to have your prospects and clients show up knowing more than your own team knows about these topics. So if there's culture changes, if there's learning and development investments, professional development, upskilling, all that stuff that needs to be made, make those investments, because without it, you're going nowhere fast when it comes to discovering new markets for sustainable data centers with advanced cooling and renewable energy. We also need to get super specific about who these buyers of advanced cooling and renewable energy are, especially when it comes to energy. There will for sure be geographic guardrails around this. When we look at your case studies, when we look at your logos, when we look at your CRM, what do all your best clients have in common as we get to documenting your ideal client profile? Where are they all located? Are they all within a certain country? Are they within several countries? Are they within a continent? Are they in multiple continents? Usually, when it comes to energy usage, your roadmap, what you do best, is going to usually be defined by some kind of geographic criteria. So first, nail that down. Second, when it comes to the scope of what you do with advanced cooling and renewable energy, you know your minimums. You know the financial investments that are required to do business with your company. Get realistic, get self-aware about how big that company needs to be to afford your minimums. That's the bottom end of the range of the headcount or the number of employees that a client needs to have in your ideal client profile. Also get self-aware about the extreme upper end of that range. Can you truly sell your advanced cooling and renewable energy solutions to massive enterprises with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees? Or do you typically max out at companies that have, I don't know, say 500 to 1,000 employees? So it may be possible that given your current product roadmap, your anticipated product roadmap, your company's existing talent, skills, expertise, investment, capital structure, all that stuff rolled together, you may come to the conclusion that you're good within a certain country. And these clients typically need to have somewhere between 50 employees and 500 employees or 1,000 employees or something like that. It's really, really important to be that specific when it comes to discovering new markets, where the proximity, the size, depending on those markets, whether the people in those countries speak the same language as your team, localization could become an issue as well. Not just localization in the educational resources and events, but localization in sales and services capabilities and proximity there. So all of that will for sure come into play with advanced cooling and renewable energy. And then there may also be certain industries or vertical markets or niches where you're better suited to sell into than others. That would be the industry field that you might go to filter on in LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Campaign Manager if you're running ads. But yeah, get really dialed into that ideal client profile. From there, build out your target account list for a couple dozen, couple hundred, maybe even a couple thousand representative companies that meet your ideal client profile criteria and within your addressable market for advanced cooling and renewable energy. That's the discovery part. In terms of those companies discovering you, that's the next part. And from there, we need to understand for both advanced cooling and renewable energy, given what your company does, your roadmap, who are the stakeholders that are most important that you need to build relationships with in these companies that you need to educate and build trust with. The most important, we'll call that the primary buyer persona. The second most important, we'll call the secondary buyer persona. And then once we've prioritized the categories of people in these companies that we need to build relationships with, that we need to educate and build trust around what we do with our expertise around advanced cooling and renewable energy, then we do the research and we figure out what their biggest goals are, what their biggest struggles are at the intersection of advanced cooling and renewable energy. Because in order to be client-centric, in order to be customer-centric and keep our egos in check, we need to talk about what they want to talk about first to give them a reason to listen to us in the first place. Because if we just talk about how wonderful we are and all our awards and our certifications and all the great people we've hired, they're going to snooze you out. They're going to ignore you because you're not reaching the conversation that's currently going on in their mind, what's top of mind for them. It's critically important that in a self-driven buyer's journey that we're really tuned into what their biggest goals are that they need to achieve professionally, what their team is working on, what their company is working on, and the biggest challenges that are driving them nuts, that are frustrating their team, that are frustrating their company. When we can create educational resources and events that address many or most of those goals and challenges, we earn our way in the first 83% of the buyer's journey, where so many companies are sales allergic, where they just don't want to spend time with your sales team until they're at the extreme end of their research and decision-making process. If we sit it out, it's not going to be a good thing, because if they find us at all at the end, the only thing that's going to win them over is the race to the bottom being cheaper. So we have to get in early. The way we get in early is we rethink how our account executives and our sales development reps show up, so that they're seen more as consultants and teachers and trusted advisors and subject matter experts. So they have to be experts around advanced cooling and renewable energy. More than likely, this involves a learning development, a professional development, curriculum, reskilling, certifications, whatever it is. So you're highly confident that your client-facing team can add significant value throughout the full buyer's journey to your prospects and clients. So that's how you discover these new markets. You need to set up a environment where your prospects and clients actually want to spend time with members of your client-facing team, so not spending all of their energy bugging them and begging them for meetings to come in and pitch. That doesn't work anymore. That ship has sailed. The buyer's journey has changed quite dramatically. So yeah, there's the discovery of new markets, and there's the entering of new markets. There's building pipeline within new markets. And this is the framework that I would use for a company that's serious about discovering these new markets for sustainable data centers with advanced cooling and renewable energy. From a tactical perspective, blogs, articles, podcast interviews, YouTube videos, educational webinars, educational events in person, and all of the above. The goal is for your best prospects and clients to want to spend as many of those 28 touch points as possible with members of your client-facing team. And there's going to be geographical differences too about how to approach this, and this will show up in your buyer personas. In the course of hosting the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, I interview people on both sides of the pond, in EMEA, in Europe, and in the US especially. I can tell you without a doubt, the narrative about what people are talking about at the intersection of sustainability is very different than the same narrative that I hear talking about sustainability in the United States. So know your market, know what's top of mind for them, make sure that you're able to address their biggest goals and their challenges that they're trying to achieve and that they're struggling to achieve when it comes to your category, and make it so that your prospects and clients actually see your company as experts and not just a vendor. That's how to discover new markets for sustainable data centers with advanced cooling and renewable energy. If you've gotten great value so far out of today's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you have an idea for a topic that we should address in an upcoming show, make sure to leave that in the comments as well. And that brings us to the final question that I'll be addressing for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A. How does a global IT sourcing advisory firm address marketing and sales challenges with intermediaries? How does a global IT sourcing advisory firm address marketing challenges and sales challenges with intermediaries? Yeah, it's a terrific question. So when I look at the business model of being a global IT sourcing advisory firm, this is in what I consider the fifth segment of the data center industry. So to review the way DCSMI categorizes the data center industry, segment number one is the operators. Segment number two is the technology companies. Segment number three is the facilities related companies. Segment number four is the construction and real estate companies and their first cousin, the capital companies. Segment number 5 is outsourced sales and marketing companies, essentially companies that are providing outsourced selling and outsourced marketing that could be provided by internal full-time salaried team members within any of those other 4 segments of the data center industry, but they bring unique expertise, unique relationships, unique assets that help to accelerate marketing and sales results. And within that ecosystem, you'll find like events and media companies, marketing agencies, PR firms, recruiting firms, and brokerage / advisory / consulting firms. These are companies that typically get paid on performance for delivering closed revenue that aligns with the company's growth prospects. In many cases, they may also be considered channel partners, which is another kind of go-to-market playbook that we talk about a lot at DC SMI. And it's just a matter of how sophisticated the channel partner program is, whether there's 2 or 3 different kinds of partners and tracks and compensation plans, or whether it's one uniform plan across the board. And that also dictates how a company defines its ideal partner profile, much like an ideal client profile, that helps to focus their efforts for recruiting and onboarding channel partners. What I find across the board, we could do a whole segment, we could do a whole half hour, an hour just on channel partner programs. But I find that a lot of companies that want this commission only type of sales firm, manufacturer's rep firm, distributor, channel partner, if they're brand new to this, a lot of times they dramatically underestimate the lead time that they're going to need to have to recruit and motivate a fractional team that gets paid on performance to prioritize what they're trying to do. It's very, very different than hiring your own marketers, hiring your own SDRs, hiring your own account executives who are working for your company 40, 50, 60 hours a week. When you're talking about a global IT sourcing advisory firm, they typically are working with at least a handful, in many cases, multiple handfuls of companies simultaneously. So I consider global IT sourcing advisory firms part of outsourced sales and marketing. So the question from this particular company is, how can they address marketing and sales challenges with intermediaries? The challenge with all of this is essentially you're talking about an outsourcer that's outsourcing. I'm going to repeat that. You're talking about a company that's seen by their clients as being an outsourced sales and marketing solution, and then they're going and they're outsourcing a second time. So we have derivative problems that tend to come up because every time you do this, there's a potential loss of fidelity. Not just fidelity in terms of sound that audio geeks are really into, especially if they've been listening to vintage music for decades, but fidelity in terms of marital fidelity, right? Yeah. Infidelity, like being loyal. So how does this play out and why does this create challenges? Because you're already, as a global IT sourcing advisory firm, likely splitting your attention among several different clients that you're providing outsourced sales and marketing to. And then instead of hiring full-time salaried employees in marketing and sales that can spend 100% of their professional lives working for growing your company and its clients' companies, you are fracturing that again by hiring fractional people who maybe you're paying on a performance basis, or maybe you're paying on a project basis or on an hourly basis, whatever it is, but you're double fracturing that. And because of that, there's only so much attention that they can pay to your company. There's only so much attention that they can pay to your clients' companies. So that's essentially the challenge, is that your company as a global IT sourcing firm already is an intermediary. And then you're going and you're staffing up your team with additional intermediaries as fractional resources as opposed to full-time resources. So I don't know how much more I can add to that aside from telling you that you're dramatically complicating things by trying to keep your everything variable costs and without taking on fixed overhead. And I know this is an inherent problem with this business model. If you want to approach this with greater success, I would recommend considering the double fractional, the intermediaries you're hiring for your sourcing firms, making similar investments that you might make if you were a channel chief from one of your clients' firms. So let's say you're working for a big technology company. Maybe they do cybersecurity or software, or storage or something like that, and they have a channel chief, and that channel chief has dozens of employees, and that they have a whole playbook, and they're really specific about what kinds of channel partners they want, and they have a recruiting motion, and they have an onboarding motion, and they have a whole separate team that's responsible for training up channel partners and supporting them and doing co-selling and everything like that, and fairly sophisticated built out comp plans for getting your channel partners to focus on closing new revenue and maintaining existing revenue, landing and expanding. All of that has been well thought out. If you take a playbook from how a channel partner manager, how a channel executive would approach that, that's more than likely the best scenario that you're going to have. So rather than trying to be very transactional with the people that are on your team, consider doing this the opposite way, where you're recruiting these fractional sales and marketing experts with a multi-year mindset, not a couple of weeks, not a couple of months where you're going to hit and run, but where you're taking an interest in a multi-year relationship. And when you do that, if it takes a little longer to find the right partners, if it takes a little longer to win them over during onboarding, if it takes them a little longer for them to feel comfortable introducing you to some of their marquee clients, so be it. It's a long game. If you want faster results, in some cases, an outsourced company can dramatically accelerate it, but you need to be careful of where the loyalty is, where the fidelity is, right? Because there's a big difference between getting it done fast and getting it done right. And in terms of getting it done right and that precision, that's where your clients and your ideal client profile and your buyer personas are so incredibly important. That's where understanding the journey, understanding how they're showing up, because it's really, really easy when you're not approaching this with the right mindset to potentially do a lot of brand damage, because these marketing and sales challenges that you're running into, more than likely, these people are representing your company in the marketplace and your clients' companies in the marketplace. And if they're not well trained, is that really the best foot forward? You need to ask yourself that. If they're not well supported, is that really the best foot forward? Because not only are you potentially burning the relationship with that fractional sales and marketing person, that person, assuming they're executing well, could be burning relationships with multiple companies and taking your company and your client's company along for the ride with the opposite of goodwill. I don't know what we'd call that, but it's definitely not great for your branding and your reputation. So if, as a global IT sourcing advisory firm, you're foregoing hiring permanent marketing and sales team members, that you would take a permanent interest in getting the hiring right and the onboarding and the professional and the learning development right, so that they're enabled and trained up to be able to make a positive impact in the marketplace. If you're doing this on a fractional basis and paying on a contingency basis and looking to keep your risk as low as possible by everything being variable overhead, recognize there's a lot of quicksand around this. One of the best ways to do this is to approach this with the mindset that these are more channel partners than commission-only employees. And I think you'll have much better results from all of this. But again, it's being self-aware that your company, as a sourcing advisory firm, is already seen as an outsourced sales and marketing solution by your clients. You're looking to outsource your outsourcing to more outsourcers. So if you're not really, really careful about that and taking and playing a long game, those are the challenges you're having. It's mindset. Channel managers, channel chiefs that do exceptionally well with this in other parts of the data center ecosystem, especially within technology and facilities, there's a lot you can learn from observing their best practices and adopting those into your firm, if that's the playbook that you're looking to use. So those are the considerations. That's what I would think about when it comes to how a global IT sourcing advisory firm can address marketing and sales challenges with intermediaries. So that's the final question that we're going to have time to address in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show. To make sure that you stay up to date about upcoming events, educational events, and resources just like this, make sure that you subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that comes to your email inbox each Sunday. You can subscribe directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com. Until next time, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. I wish you great success. Have a great week, and look forward to having you tune in again next time. Take care now.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.